Thursday mornings often unfolded with a predictability that matched their lackluster reputation: dry toast, endless email threads that seemed to have no conclusion, and the steady drone of the neighbor's lawnmower, who appeared to achieve a zen-like state by trimming his grass thrice weekly. That specific Thursday, however, seemed intent on leaving a lasting impression. It wasn't anything grandiose, like thunderclaps or enigmatic letters appearing in the mailbox. Rather, it was a bit more understated than that. It began with a ceramic frog. Olivia had an affinity for gaudy decorations. Ceramic frogs, artificial vines scaling the kitchen cabinets, a pineapple-shaped cookie jar that was off-limits for cookies. She described it as charmingly unconventional. I dubbed it the delightful offspring of a yard sale and a glue gun. In our home, we had approximately 7 ceramic frogs, each one embodying a unique profession. In the kitchen, Chef Frog was busy at work, while Noga Frog lounged in the living room. My personal favorite, Business Casual Frog, stood by with our spare keys, looking far more ready for a tax audit than I ever could be. This morning, however, it was Therapist Frog that set the first domino in motion. It perched on Olivia's nightstand, complete with its tiny glasses and clipboard, eternally nodding in silent judgment. It had lingered for years. Yet, as I walked past, it had vanished. A photo frame occupies the space instead. I blinked. It wasn't that photo frames were rare, we had plenty of them. It was because I recognized that space. That space had been fiercely and meticulously protected by Therapist Frog for most of our marriage. That object held more authority in our bedroom than I did. So, of course, I searched. And there it was, a photo of Olivia, beaming with a smile that had once convinced me to part with my motorbike 11 years ago, her arms wrapped around a man I didn't recognize. Not in a who's that kind of way, but in a this man has never been within 500 miles of any or narrative or shared kind of way. He appeared to be a CrossFit enthusiast, sharing his experiences during dinner conversations. Olivia donned the very jumper she insisted she had mistakenly given away last autumn, the same one I attempted to retrieve from the Goodwill bin because I adored its scent that reminded me of her. I have been married to Olivia for 13 years now. For 13 years, we've navigated our toothbrush routines with a certain rhythm, our socks somehow coordinating amidst the laundry mayhem, and engaged in spirited debates about the proper dishwasher loading technique, her method often involving a commanding shout to fix it before she strolls off. Throughout all those years, she had never replaced a single frog. That in itself warranted a congressional hearing. I chose not to inquire about it immediately. No, that's not really my style. I find value in collecting information initially, reminiscent of a forlorn, undercompensated investigator whose sole mystery revolves around his own relationship. 2 days later, the next clue arrived. Olivia had embraced a new pastime, jigsaw puzzles. Except she referred to them as spatial therapy. What is the initial conundrum? A 2,000-piece puzzle of a nighttime skyline. I inquired whether she was getting ready for a career as a professional librarian. She advised me to allow the process to unfold. I allowed it. Then arrived the puzzle mat. And then a unique puzzle illumination. And finally, imagine this, an ergonomic puzzle chair. At that moment, I realized something was amiss. Olivia dismissed the idea of ergonomic anything. This woman once referred to lumber support as a scheme orchestrated by the chair industry. Yet, I remained silent. I lingered. I observed. And one morning, I received my reward. Saturday. The day for tackling the laundry. Not the thrilling type that comes with unexpected cash in hand. No, this was the Adam who shrank my favorite cardigan again. Olivia had placed her phone atop the dryer. I didn't pry. I was not obligated to. The device illuminated. And there it was, a message preview that simply read, "Still reflecting on that last piece we created together." Now, let me be clear, I'm no detective, but I can certainly recognize the art of flotation when it presents itself. I might not have the chiseled physique of Mr. Skyline puzzle piece, but I struggle to link two dots even when they're just 3 inches apart, especially if one of them is winking. Yet, I remained inactive. What is the reason? Due to the existence of a strategy. When you discover that your wife is exchanging puzzle metaphors with someone whose physique likely conveys messages of regret and hidden meanings, you don't simply rush in, flailing your arms and losing your composure. Negative. You patiently wait for the right moment. You allowed her to construct her quaint realm of deception, adorned with comfortable furnishings, only to nonchalantly dismantle the very ground it stood upon. I held off until Sunday brunch arrived. Olivia has a deep affection for brunch. She expresses that it gives her the impression we're living in a Nancy Meyers film. We settled into our familiar place in the sunroom, the one with the slightly cracked window that fills the air with the scent of damp cement. Olivia had her tablet, scrolling through recipes she'd never cook. I had the crossword. "You know," I said, not looking up. "I saw that you replaced therapist frog." She froze. A small thing. Barely noticeable. But after 12 years, you learn to spot the micro-freezes. "Oh," she said too brightly. "Yeah. I just wanted a change." "Who?" I nodded, circling a 7-letter word for betrayal. It was deceit. Felt poetic. "And the photo?" I asked casually. "Nice sweater. Thought it was gone." She blinked. "What photo?" "The one with Captain Crunch abs," I said. "You know, your co-puzzler." Silence. And then get this, she smiled. Not sheepishly. Not apologetically. Just smiled. Like we were playing poker and I'd finally called her bluff. "Okay," she said, setting down her tablet. "You caught me." That's all she said. No dramatic confession. No sob story about how I didn't see her anymore. Just a calm, almost smug, "You caught me." So I smiled back. "Well," I said, sipping my lukewarm coffee, "I hope you two finish that skyline. I'd hate for you to leave a corner undone after ruining a perfectly good marriage." She blinked. "Wait. What?" I stood up, wiped my hands on the dish towel like a man who'd just finished a dirty job, and walked out of the room. Not the house. Just the room. Because when a ceramic frog gives you more honesty than your spouse, you stop looking for answers. You start looking for exits. And that was just the beginning. It wasn't the kind of break where it makes a dramatic sound and floods the kitchen. Just the boring kind where it stops doing what it was designed for and starts humming like it's trying to remember the lyrics to a song it used to know. I wasn't even mad. Guess I'll wash them by hand. Silence. A board game company. Board games? Didn't you say that market was creatively stagnant last week? She smiled like she'd caught me trying to speak Mandarin. Well, this one's different. It's niche. That's how I learned that niche meant, don't ask me again. I went back to the garage, and this time, I found the little screwdriver. Not because I was suddenly passionate about fixing the lamp, but because twisting screws felt more productive than pretending Olivia was still in a marriage with me. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man standing there holding a framed canvas. He was maybe 41, wore a t-shirt that said, "Yes, this is my solving face," and smelled faintly of printer ink and ego. "Delivery for Olivia," he said. I took the package, because that's what I do. I sign for things I didn't order, repair appliances I didn't break, and apparently now also house art I didn't choose. Curiosity got the better of me, so I peeked at the invoice while Olivia was upstairs pretending to be busy with a Word document. The piece was titled, "Completion, 2,000 Pieces and 1 Soul." I stood there for a solid minute wondering how people got paid to come up with this stuff. I leaned the canvas against the wall in the hallway. When Olivia came down and saw it, she lit up in a way I hadn't seen since she discovered wireless earbuds. "Oh, it's here," she said. "What is it?" "A gift," she said, pausing just long enough for me to hope it was for me. "For someone at work." I nodded slowly. "Right. One of those work gifts you ship to your own house." She gave me the kind of smile a kindergarten teacher gives a kid who's about to eat glue and said, "It's easier for me to inspect it here." I wanted to say something clever, something cutting, but instead, I just said, "Cool." The days that followed were filled with more of the same. Sudden laughter during mysterious video calls, packages arriving at odd hours, and the increasing presence of things that felt not mine. A new throw blanket on a couch that somehow matched none of our furniture. A sleek new lamp that made my nightstand look like it was from a different century. A playlist full of acoustic indie music that played while she cooked rice like she was in a slow-motion commercial. Then came the ultimate clue. The library book. Olivia is not a library person. She once told me libraries were existentially dusty, but this one sat right there on the coffee table, the collaborative mind, building deep connections through shared goals. I picked it up, flipped through it, and saw a page dog-eared. On it, someone had underlined, "Emotional bonds are often strengthened through the act of solving puzzles together, as it encourages communication, patience, and mutual satisfaction." That's when I realized I wasn't married to a person anymore. I was married to a hobby. I started leaving my own clues. Subtle things, like replacing the batteries in the remote and not mentioning it. She didn't notice. I reorganized the spice rack alphabetically. Still nothing. Finally, I did the one thing that should have raised an alarm in any married household. I rearranged the living room. Moved the couch, rotated the rug, swapped 2 chairs. Olivia walked in, paused, tilted her head, and said, "Did the light change in here?" That was the moment I knew I could set fire to the ceiling and she'd assume we got a new bulb. I decided I needed more information. So one night, after she'd fallen asleep while listening to her evening grounding sounds playlist, I sat down at her laptop. I didn't open anything, just stared at the screen. Because the truth was, I didn't need proof. Not anymore. The puzzle pieces were all there. The new hobbies. The unexplained laughter. The shifting furniture. The emotional deflection packaged as self-care. And, most telling of all, the fact that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being part of her plans. I was now furniture. I was the dishwasher. Expected to work, never noticed unless broken. So I closed the laptop, got up, and went back to the garage. This time, I fixed the lamp. On Monday, our Wi-Fi died. This might seem like a minor inconvenience to the uninitiated, but in our house, losing internet access is one step away from martial law. Joy stood over the router like she expected it to apologize. She reset it once, twice, then started tapping her foot with the enthusiasm of someone about to write a strongly worded email they couldn't send. "Have you been downloading anything?" she asked me, with the accusatory tone of someone who clearly believed I ran an underground torrent ring in my free time. "Only my hopes and dreams," I replied. "Slow connection, still buffering." She didn't laugh. Instead, she squinted at the blinking lights as if intimidation worked on machinery. Then she announced she'd take her laptop to her sister's house to catch up on work, which was odd, considering she never mentioned having a deadline. Even more odd, her sister lives 41 minutes away and once spent an entire Thanksgiving arguing that pickles are a root vegetable. But who was I to question the urgent need for proximity to someone who once used salad dressing as shampoo? So Olivia left, taking her laptop, her charger, and the silence with her. I stayed behind with a half-working router and a growing curiosity that it started to feel like a second job. I didn't immediately go digging. Contrary to popular belief, not all suspicious husbands tear through drawers like raccoons in a kitchen. No. I had a different idea. One rooted in pure, mid-range suburban logic. I went to the office. Now, when I say office, I don't mean a home office. I mean the office. The one she stopped going to regularly after she started working remotely. A term that in our household had started to sound less like employment and more like independent study. Olivia had kept the lease on her tiny commercial office space downtown for meetings. Except none of her clients ever seemed to know she had an office. She claimed it gave her a place to think. Which was fair, I guess, if she required industrial ceiling tiles and parking meters to properly brainstorm and copy. She never changed the key code on the front door. Probably assumed I wouldn't bother. And until now, I hadn't. The place looked exactly as I remembered it. Aggressively beige, as if it had been furnished exclusively by people named Deborah. There was a plant in the corner that had died sometime during the Obama administration, a coffee machine that I was fairly sure dispensed more lies than caffeine, and a cheap framed quote on the wall that read, "Create, communicate, connect." I had always assumed that was about her job. Now it read like a list of steps someone might follow while starting a double life. I sat at her desk, opened her drawer, and found exactly what I was looking for. Notebooks. Olivia had always been a note person. She didn't trust digital calendars. They're smug, she once told me, like Outlook had personally insulted her handwriting. She wrote everything down. Meetings, ideas, to-do lists. Her journals were less, Dear Diary, and more, Meeting with Janine. Ring folders, Mention Synergy. The first 2 notebooks were nothing unusual. Half-finished sketches of ad layouts, page after page of slogan ideas, and a very long list of alternatives for the word, cozy. But the 3rd notebook was different. This one had no label, just a single sticker on the front that said, Archive. Very dramatic. I opened it. The entries weren't dated. Just scattered thoughts. Half sentences. Names. Words underlined multiple times. At first it read like a chaotic brainstorming session, until I noticed the repetition. One name, specifically. Jade. Now, I don't know a Jade. We don't have any Jades in the family. Olivia doesn't have a cousin Jade. None of our neighbors are named Jade. In fact, the last time I heard the name Jade, it was in reference to a dentist who moonlighted as a jazz saxophonist in a movie we turned off halfway through. But Jade was in this notebook. Repeatedly. Jade understands. Meeting Jade 3 p.m. Bring printout. Jade says we need to be honest with ourselves. Jade likes the fig color best. Who in their right mind likes the fig color best? Nobody. That's who. I kept reading. The notes became more personal. Not romantic, not explicitly, but intimate in a way that made my stomach do something it hadn't done since I watched Olivia throw out my signed baseball card because it looked dusty. There was even a list. Titled, Why It Feels Different. I'll save you the full thing, but here were the top contenders. He listens without correcting me. No pressure to be interesting. Shared silence feels like something, not nothing. He laughs with his whole face. I'm not a wife with him. I closed the notebook and sat back in the chair, which squeaked loudly, as if objecting to my emotional journey. There it was. Not an affair. Not in the traditional sense. No lipstick on a shirt. No mysterious receipts. Just something sneaky-o. A full-blown, DIY, IQ-assembled emotional connection. With a man named Jade, who liked fig-colored things and apparently didn't find Olivia's monologues about typography unbearable. I sat there for a few minutes, letting the fluorescent lights hum me into a state of acceptance. I wasn't going to confront her yet. That would have been too generous. No. I had a better idea. When I got home, I waited for Olivia to return. She came back around 7, humming a tune I didn't recognize and carrying a bag from her favorite overpriced stationery store. I didn't say a word about the office. Or Jade. Instead, I told her we needed to have a conversation soon, and that I'd like her to clear her schedule for Thursday night. She agreed, probably assuming it was about the dishwasher. But I had plans. I'd gone to the print shop that afternoon, used her old design templates, and made something for her. A brochure. Professionally printed. Trifled. Glossy. On the cover. So you're in a marriage but emotionally committed to a fig-loving ghost man. Inside, bullet points. Quotes from her own notebook. A suggested reading list. A fake testimonial from Therapist Frog. I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted her to know that I knew. Without yelling. Without drama. With layout design and irony. She hadn't seen it yet. But Thursday was coming. Olivia was on time. That was already suspicious. It was 6:58 p.m. when she walked into the living room, clutching her tablet like it was a shield. I was sitting on the couch with the brochure on the coffee table, next to a coaster she never used and a pen that hadn't worked since 2019 but was somehow still sacred. The TV was off, the lights were on, and the air in the room was doing its best impression of an unpaid intern, awkward and unsure what to do next. She glanced at the brochure, then at me, then at the brochure again. No questions. Just that half blink she did when she was processing something she hadn't anticipated. Like when the credit card machine at the store asks if she wants cash back and it throws off her entire sense of purpose. She picked it up. Didn't sit down. Just stood there, reading it, like she was browsing in a museum exhibit titled, Modern Spousal Disappointment, a Study. You designed this? She asked, eventually. No. I outsourced it to a disappointed version of myself from 2 years ago. I replied. He does good work. She nodded once. Fig-loving ghost man? Accurate. According to your archive, I said. Olivia closed the brochure carefully, like it might explode. Then she finally sat across from me, crossing her legs like she was getting comfortable, which was deeply ironic considering she hadn't been comfortable in this marriage since Jade entered the scene with his empathetic nodding and overpriced shoes. I take it you went to my office, she said. I did. She nodded again, like we were in a business meeting, and I'd just submitted Q3 numbers that didn't entirely please the board. Well, she said, I guess we're having the talk. Finally, I said, just like we never planned. She exhaled like someone pretending to be patient at a DMV. Adam, before you spiral into a speech. Oh, we're doing the pre-speech warning now? Great. Let me know if you'd like me to format it into sections. Maybe throw in a QR code. Olivia stared at me for a moment. Are you trying to joke your way through this? No, I said. I'm succeeding at it. She didn't smile. She rarely did anymore unless her phone was involved or Jade, presumably, was holding a paint swatch. I didn't intend for anything to happen, she said. Classic opening move. The verbal equivalent of offering a tissue after lighting the fire. I know, I said. Accidentally writing someone's name in a notebook 18 times is a very common form of involuntary hand spasm. She gave me the look. You know the one. The combination of don't start, and I still need you to take the trash out later. But she didn't say anything. Just sat there, waiting to see if I'd make it easier. I didn't. So, I said, where do we go from here? Do you need to check in with Jade's feelings first? Or should I fill out a doodle poll for everyone's availability to emotionally exit this? Olivia leaned forward slightly, her elbows on her knees. Adam, you knew this wasn't working. No, I knew you weren't working, I corrected. You clocked out months ago. I just kept covering your shift. You were distracted, too. I was married. That's what it looks like when someone still shows up even after it gets boring. Olivia looked like she wanted to argue, but couldn't figure out which part was incorrect. That was always the problem. Her sense of fairness only operated when she was the one being inconvenienced. "I didn't cheat on you," she said flatly. "Thanks for the technical clarification," I replied. "Maybe later you can give me a tour of all the emotionally neutral activities you've shared with Mr. Meaningful Silences. You're being unfair. And you're being careful, which is somehow worse. You don't lie. You edit. You redact. You curate truth the way museums do, with velvet ropes and selective lighting." That shut her up. For a while, anyway. Long enough for the silence to become a third party in the room. Eventually, she said, "I don't want to be the villain here." "Then you should have picked a different genre." Silence again. This time, it settled more comfortably. Like we both realized we'd been trying to out-awkward each other and finally hit equilibrium. Olivia stood up, walked to the bookshelf, picked up one of the books we used to read out loud before sleep became her favorite excuse not to talk. She flipped through it like it held answers, then put it back without comment. "I think we should separate," she said finally. "Shocking twist," I said. "Will there be a sequel?" Olivia ignored that. "I've looked at apartments. I can stay with my sister for a while." "The one who thinks all cheeses come from sheep?" "She's more emotionally evolved than you think. She got in a fight with a parking meter." Olivia didn't smile, but her mouth twitched, which was the closest she'd come to amusement in months. "Can we do this without making it ugly?" she asked. "Sure," I said. "We can file the paperwork under creative differences." She nodded and walked to the hallway. Stopped. "Look back. I did love you, Adam." I nodded. "I know. You just ran out." She left. The house felt different, but not emptier. Just unmuted, like someone had turned the volume back up on my life. I sat back down, picked up the brochure, and flipped it open. Page 2 was titled, "Things You Ignored While Falling for a Man Who Compliments Paint Colors." It wasn't for her. It was for me. I never imagined my revenge would involve color-coded folders, a spreadsheet, and an email titled, "Joint Responsibilities and Reallocation Strategy." But here we were. Olivia moved out on a Thursday. She used a moving service that looked like it came straight from an ad targeting middle-aged divorcees with a moderate interest in yoga and synod drawer liners. Two guys in crisp polo shirts loaded her labeled boxes into the truck like they were handling artifacts. No goodbyes. No lingering glances. Just one awkward fist bump between her and the taller mover, which seemed unnecessary, but I chose to let it slide. Olivia was the kind of person who thought casual gestures earned her points for being real. She didn't take everything, of course. She left behind exactly 4 houseplants, 3 throw pillows, and one blurry photo of us at a wedding in 2015 where I'm blinking and she looks mildly inconvenienced. It's what you'd expect someone to leave if they were staging the crime scene of a personality. Her absence was loud in a quiet way. The bathroom counter had less clutter. The laundry basket wasn't constantly full of clothes she swore she never wore. and the thermostat stopped changing itself at 2 a.m. like it was haunted by someone who preferred ambient glacier temperatures. But I wasn't going to let it go that easily. I wasn't mad in the traditional sense. I wasn't heartbroken either. Not in the way you're supposed to be when your spouse leaves you for an emotional connection with someone who wears matching socks on purpose. What I was, and I say this with complete sincerity, was organized. I'd spent the week compiling a list. Not of grievances. Not of insults. Of receipts. Literal receipts. Transactions. Contributions. Every dollar I'd put into our joint life, down to the $27 I spent replacing her office chair after she said the old one gave off executive imposter syndrome. See, Olivia had this theory that emotional labor was the real currency of a relationship. Which was convenient for her, since her version of emotional labor was sighing loudly during disagreements and calling it processing. My version was paying bills, unclogging drains, and attending 5 separate dinner parties where I had to nod along while her marketing friend said things like, "I think branding is just modern mythology." But sure. Emotional labor. So I itemized everything. Mortgage contributions. Utilities. Her car insurance. The cost of our streaming services, which she always justified by saying, were supporting the arts. I even included the Pilates classes she never went to but insisted on keeping for balance. I emailed it all to her. No subject line. No message. Just the attachment, titled, "Final Billing, Relationship Closeout Draft." She replied 8 hours later with a one-word email, "Seriously?" I didn't respond. 2 days later, she called. I didn't answer. Then she texted, "I don't know what kind of point you're trying to make here, but it's petty." I replied, "No, it's itemized." That's different. That weekend, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a Venmo printout, labeled, "Emotional Damages." Total, $0. Classic Olivia. She never could pass up a punchline when she thought she was in control of the joke. I framed it and put it next to the TV. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing other adjustments in my environment. For starters, the house became incredibly efficient. Dishes were washed and actually dried instead of air resting for several days. No one left drawers open. Toilet paper rolls were replaced instead of being balanced on the holder like a lazy game of Jenga. There were no new purchases of mystery kitchen gadgets that promised less friction in food prep, and I hadn't stepped on a single decorative pebble in the bathroom in over 20 days. I started rearranging the house slowly. Not because of some dramatic emotional cleansing, but because now I could. The furniture no longer had to be positioned for optimal energy flow. I could finally put the TV where it made sense, not where it invited conversation. Then, one evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man holding a clipboard. Glasses. Beige vest. The sort of man who definitely owns more than one fountain pen. "Hi," he said. "I'm Jade." I blinked. Of course he was. "I'm looking for Olivia," he continued. "She asked me to drop off some of her files." "She doesn't live here anymore," I said. "Oh," he said. "She didn't mention that." I stepped aside. Want to come in? I'll get you a box. He hesitated, clearly not thrilled about entering the lair of the man who had once been contractually obligated to tolerate the woman he was now possibly building IKEA furniture with. He followed me into the entryway. Stood stiffly, like a guest on a game show who had just been told the rules were subject to change. I retrieved a box from the hall closet. Labeled it Olivia, miscellaneous, with a Sharpie. Handed it to him. She leave anything interesting? He asked. Only lasting impressions, I said. Jade nodded. She's unique. That's a word. She said you were very, he paused, structured. Also a word. Jade smiled politely, adjusted his glasses, and gave me a small nod. Well, thanks. Before you go, I said, can I ask something? He paused. Sure. You ever solved that puzzle? He blinked. Puzzle? You know. The skyline. 2,000 pieces. Shared silence. Mutual satisfaction. Jade flushed, which was gratifying. I don't think that was it. Never mind, I said. It was rhetorical. He left. I closed the door, went to the kitchen, and opened the drawer where Olivia used to keep her spice labels alphabetized. I pulled out the one thing I had left that still carried her handwriting, a sticky note that read, "Don't forget you," in the middle of everything. I stuck it to the inside of the trash cabinet. Then I entered the dishwasher, sat down at the kitchen table, and started planning the redesign of the guest room. Not because I had a guest coming. Not because I needed a change. Just because I could. Tuesday morning started with an email from Olivia. That was already too formal for my taste. Most people text. Or if they're feeling spicy, they call and pretend to be surprised you picked up. But Olivia? She was back to using Gmail like we were ex-coworkers wrapping up a marketing project that didn't meet its KPIs. Subject line. Final conversation proposal. You'd think she was applying for a grant. The body is.